Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this Monday afternoon, maybe for your lunch hour. We're really happy to have you here. As we wrote in the invitation, this is a dialogue, a conversation between Michael, myself, and hopefully any of you who want to contribute along the way. Really, this stemmed from we, as a staff, there's about 25 of us Christian counselors. We get together once a month for our staff meeting and then once a month for our group supervision. And we always have these really interesting conversations. And Michael prepared a devotional for our staff earlier this year, and it was about attachment and the theological underpinnings of attachment, the psychological underpinnings of attachment, and it led us to this really practical and interesting dialogue amongst our staff. And the thought was, wow, it'd be really great to share that with others. So that brings us here to today. So we're excited to have you join us for that. My name is John Noto. I'm one of the owners and clinical director here at Whitestone. Like I said, there's 25 of us Christian counselors in Chicagoland, Cook, and Lake counties. We have 4 offices that are in Palatine, Lake Bluff, Grays Lake, and here I am in Northfield. And we're spread out like that to do what our mission is, which is to partner with local churches and congregations. And we partner with pastors and churches really directly to assist in the mission of caring well for God's children. And this is just one more avenue we hope to do that. We hope that this is a blessing to you. If you have any questions for us about Whitestone or anything like that, we'd, of course, be happy to handle that as well. But yeah, why don't we jump right into it and kind of get the ball rolling. I gave Michael a little bit of warning that I was going to ask him, but Michael, why don't you share with everyone here just what led you to counseling, how you find yourself here, and maybe share a little bit about your work here at Whitestone as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I out of college, I actually first was working in ministry. So I worked in youth ministry and I did some worship ministry along the way. And pretty early on in that time frame, I would say I was very drawn into interpersonal relationships and building relationships with students. When I did my undergrad at Trinity, and we did like a counseling skills class, and I loved it. So I always had it on the back of my mind that I would maybe do counseling. I actually had a professor mistakenly suggest and say to me one time, "You're going to be a great counselor," and I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm going into ministry." But later on, so after a number of years doing ministry, I just continually felt drawn into understanding psychology, understanding how these concepts of understanding the self and, helping people with various struggles where some of the typical things that would help you through just seem to not work. And then you're stuck in that. And so I've been also myself, I've been through some counseling for myself, and my story plays a big part in being interested in counseling as well. And so finally I did decide to pursue it more directly, and I did my master's at Trinity. I did go back to Trinity and had a good time. But yeah, and then I got into the program there and just fell in love with it, and felt like a really good fit for me. And so I've never really looked back. I still enjoy ministry. I'm still pretty involved at my church. But yeah, counseling has fit like like a good shoe. I don't know. It's a silly analogy. But so I've been with Whitestone now for a little over 2 years. And in my time at Whitestone, I primarily work with adults. Do work with teens as well, but I do primarily work with adults, and I've worked with a number of couples as well. And so a lot of my work with couples got me into learning about adult attachment. And so that was maybe my main in to thinking about attachment and looking at some of the information that's out there about that. But I was really curious about how that would kind of fit with an idea, with a kind of the theological idea of we're created to be in relationship with God, right? So attachment's all about relationship. And I was coming into that thinking, okay, well, we talk a lot in church, in our Christian experience, about attachment with God, and even outside of Christianity, a lot of things like 12-step programs. There is a lot of movement around spirituality, this idea of higher power and spirituality playing a really important part in mental health, right? And so, pretty much from the get-go, I was holding those two things. And I feel like our conversation today will be holding those two things together and just seeing really what we can understand about both of them as we hold them next to each other.
Yeah. You're sprinkling some breadcrumbs for where we're gonna go, which makes sense. Yeah. Well, as we talked about this, I thought a great place to start would just be as simple as we can define attachment. And actually, what's interesting is when you're sharing about your life and the journey that led you here. I think one of the first things you said is you were really interested in relationships and you were trying to figure out yourself. And what a great picture for attachment right there is who am I as an individual? Who am I with other people? But the picture I see in my head, and you tell me how you'd frame this up, with some of these ideas we're talking about. When I think of attachment, my youngest two kids are both adopted, you know that. And I remember this phenomenon of they both were born in South Korea, and so by the time we finish our process, they're almost 2 years old. And so when you have a little baby, attachment looks one way. When you have a 2-year-old who doesn't speak your language, attachment looks another way. And I remember being very nervous about this, and our social worker said, attachment is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And what she said was, it's your job to care for them, hold them, feed them, and kiss their boo-boos. She was really specific, like, it's your job to meet their needs and attachment will happen. And I'm just curious, as you think of that through, maybe let's start with the psychological lens. What's going on there, Michael? What is it about that? Right? We've all seen that happen with kids, but what is it that's happening there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that psychology, like any science, a lot of the time, it's really just putting a name on something that is already is, right? So it's nothing new that babies and children are dependent and that there is this relationship with their parents that is formative, right? It's not new. That goes back a long time. But the idea of attachment, I think, really entered into the fold when people started to recognize that how that attachment relationship formed, for good or for bad, like if it didn't form, if it did, was connected to those children essentially developing a lot of issues, challenges, struggling with mental health, struggling to learn their place in the world, have a proper relationship with themselves, and be in relationship with others. And so then the question became, well, what is it that children really do need from their parents? And what happens when they get that? What happens when they don't, right? And so I think at its core, when I think of attachment theory, it is how does the bond forming or the attachment forming process in those early years, but like you said, the ongoing process as well, how does that influence and affect the individual developing properly, right? And so
I wonder if when you say bond, what are the main components of that? Again, I have a picture in my head, but I'd like to break that down with specificity. What goes into the ideal bond?
Yeah. I think the simplest way I like to think about it and explain it to clients is from the get-go, we're sort of created or designed for connection and for safety, and it's the holding of both. And so they have this concept called secure attachment, or the secure base, right? Home base. And this is this idea of what a child needs is safety, knowing that they're protected, that they have enough protection and safety to take risks, explore, try to walk, knowing that they're going to fall, right? And one of the main important pieces of that safety is the relationship. And so when children don't feel the relationship is stable, right? If they feel ignored, or if they feel shamed, or if they sense that something that they're doing is making their parents upset, they will go into sort of almost like a kind of trauma response, really. This safety response of they need to figure out what is wrong with the relationship, what did they do to cause that, and make that adjustment. And so, yeah, that safety is important, connection is important, and then there are things that the caregiver can do to facilitate those two things. So I don't know if that's too much at once, but
no, that's great. And actually, I might be taking us a little too ahead, but
that's
it's
okay.
hard not to. When you say connection and safety, of course, in the context of believers, like the first thing that pops into my head is this is God's job, is to provide and to connect, or not God's job. This is God's character. And so, if you have more to say about the psychological framework, I'd love to hear it. But I wonder if this might be a useful time to pivot to the theological framework and what's happening, not just in our little family units and our little relationships, but in a broader capacity in the world.
Yeah, I think, what comes to mind for me is friends that I've had that have become parents. One of the common things I'll hear from them is that being a parent and feeling that responsibility, I'm not a parent, but being a parent, feeling that responsibility and that love, they start to sense and learn something about God. And it kind of opens up their own experience of realizing their own kind of child relationship with God in that way. And so, but yeah, right, if you think about it, God is good. He is powerful. He doesn't change, right? And so he alone, in a way, is that perfect fit for what I think, and this is maybe my main claim here, is that perfect fit for what we all find intuitively to need, is where can I just be my unfiltered self as I am, imperfect, in process, and have someone else not be moved by that, not be fazed, not be threatened, but to see it and receive it, to welcome it, to help me learn how to become more as I want to be, as I ought to be, right? Those sort of things. And so, yeah, and I know too, parents know how hard that is to be, and I don't think any parent really can be that perfectly, and that's hard.
Yeah, it is a humbling and educational experience. I will say from personal experience.
Well, I'll also say too, you mentioned the devotional. The devotional, we looked at Psalm 40, right? And so you have this image of when I was in the pit, when I was stuck in the miry bog, right? God lifted me up, put me on solid ground, put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise. And so I think you see this in the Psalms a lot, in just the depiction of people writing about their experience of the ups and downs in life, the brokenness of relationships, that they find that as they experience the security of relationship they have with a God that is there, that is good, that can rescue them, that can see them, that can comfort them, that they are then strengthened, and they come to a little bit more of a sense of stability of self through that process of even just writing the psalm.
The question that pops in my head right away is, like, what does that look like? I'm curious if you could share, put some flesh on that. Like, maybe you working with a client or in your own life or something like that, to find this stability of self through attachment with God? I mean, I presume that's what you're saying, right? Paint a picture. What does that look like?
Yeah, stability of self through attachment with God. Yeah, what comes to my mind is a lot of examples of when that doesn't happen, which I know isn't what you're asking, but that's just what comes to my mind, is just the work I do with clients, the work I've had to do in my own life to go back to these moments where we were suffering alone, or reached out to receive the love that we feel like we need, or some sort of, to be able to lean on somebody and they abandoned us, or they shamed us or dismissed us, right? And how just like crushing that is. And so, yeah, I know for me in my own story, a big part of my early experiences with God were, they came in high school at a time where my family life was just a complete mess. And I was feeling a lot of loneliness, isolation. I felt like I had to put the needs of my family ahead of my own. I ended up at a youth retreat that I kind of didn't even want to be at, to be honest. But something there that really hit me was this idea of a personal God, this idea of like God knows and sees and cares enough to have done something drastic about the broken relationship in sending Jesus, and Jesus being God, right? Taking on our sin, dying for the joy set before him. And so that really stood out to me conceptually, but I also experientially felt his presence, his closeness, the love, the sense of I'm not alone, that I am held, that I am seen, that I matter, that I have value, right? And I don't feel those things all the time forever. But in those sweet moments, you experience that in connection with God, maybe through a worship song, through the scriptures, right? Or just through kind of a spiritual experience. And it is able to feel as powerful as real closeness with even a person. And in many ways, closeness with a person can't actually create that same experience. So I think that our relationship with God does have the power to touch something very, very deep within us that we just feel to be there, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing you say that. Maybe we could draw a corollary in our world. We see, somebody experiences pain, they have some sort of difficulty in their life, some sort of burden, and if they have a healthy attachment figure to turn to, what do? You carry that burden to that attachment figure to find some sort of healing and restoration, some care, some support. The version of that in our faith life, or even the more grand version of our lives as a whole, is when we feel some sort of burden, we go to the ultimate attachment figure, which is God, through prayer, through study, through all sorts of spiritual practices, to receive some of what you were saying before, this connection and safety from God.
Yeah. Well, and alternatively, for many people, this was true for me as well. For many people, that isn't what they do. They lean on themselves, and so when they and oftentimes that is connected back to these time and time again of reaching out and getting nothing from your caregiver, or feeling invisible, feeling or maybe you were abandoned, right? And so what people then do out of that brokenness is they adapt. They make sense out of their experience and they adapt. And one of those common adaptations is being close to people is associated with pain and grief and or danger, right? Or I would feel shamed, I would feel abused, right? And so what people then learn is even though they will feel in themselves this need for connection, that connection is very scary, and that fear comes from lived experiences. And so, and also just to validate it further, people aren't always safe, right? And so I think it is very common for people to actually not, especially adults, right, to not reach out for help or care, or for there to even be negative connotation around, oh, that person just wants attention, right, or that person's so needy. We have it in our culture, this idea of independence, the kind of rugged individualist that just can not be affected by the things of life and not need anybody, sort of being raised up and glamorized.
Yeah, I sometimes call that the Batman fallacy, that I can just carry a trauma all by myself and then, use it to do cool things and never face the pain.
No, Batman's
Yeah.
a great example because, I mean, if we're going to psychologize Batman, right? In a way, he's stuck reenacting the moment of his parents' death. He is stuck constantly trying to go and find the bad guy and kind of correct that moment of brokenness.
Right, absolutely.
Which he didn't do in the moment.
Look at two shrinks nerding out about
There
Batman
you go.
psychology. Okay, we digress. Well, let's do this. I'm curious, where we want to head is thinking about this, especially through the lens of a vocational pastor or minister, because I know we have a number of those listening, and that's part of why we, what we wanted to get to. So I want to go there, but I wonder if it would make sense, Mike, to spend a little bit of time at least shining a spotlight on adult attachment. You've mentioned that a couple times. And we're talking about lifespan attachment, the things that have happened early in life, in the securest, most formative relationships of your life, and how that influences you later in life. And we could say so much more about that, because that's a big part of the human experience. But you've talked about, and I think it'd be useful to focus on this idea of adult attachment in our current relationships. How does attachment work? So I'll let you share about that. What's important for us to know about that?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of adult attachment, they've kind of come up with what they'll call your adult attachment style, right? And so about my cards on the table, I don't think this is you're either 100% this or you're 100% this. I think it is more of a spectrum, and I think it is more dependent on the relationship you're in. But essentially, it is either you tend to kind of lean more towards safety of self at the cost of relationship. So that would be something more like avoidant attachment. So the avoidant attachment is somebody who does tend to be a little bit more independent. They want relationship, but they want to protect their kind of alone time, or right. And when there's conflict, or when there's a seeming kind of looming brokenness there, or rupture in the relationship, right, a fight or disagreement, they tend to withdraw. And again, because they've learned, like, in order to protect the relationship and themselves, distance is better. The other end of that would be the opposite, right? This is the person who leans in, who makes their needs known. They are more prone towards sort of being like anxious, a little bit more dependent, and this is the person who has essentially found that they've prioritized connection over safety, and so what's happening is they're putting something on the relationship that goes above and beyond a mutual bond. It's not just, hey, I like you, you like me. It's, I need you to kind of give me attention and meet my needs, or I won't be safe, I won't be okay. Right? And so they're a little bit more anxious. They're more likely to pursue when there's a rupture, right? And as you can imagine, a lot of relationships kind of are this interesting puzzle piece between an avoidant and an anxious, right? But then there are people that have had mixed experiences that also struggle with both and will vacillate between the two. So sometimes that's called disorganized attachment, right? And that idea, the way I understand it is, they again, they will feel needy. They'll reach out, they'll get closeness, they'll be terrified of that closeness, they'll pull away, they'll feel terrified. So and it is this kind of horrible loop of just being stuck, and both options actually don't really work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you say that these are not definitive forever things. This is more so kind of categories to understand dynamics between people, and to really to invite everybody to reflect on their own experience and why they might be a certain way, without judgment, without condemnation, with a curiosity instead of finger pointing. Like that's primarily how we use these sorts of things. Is just to invite that level of introspection that is helpful for movement forward. Mm-hmm.
Another important piece of it, I would say, is that what is unresolved through childhood tends to be brought into adult relationships. And so there is this sense of, right, if I come into the world just intuitively feeling and needing a kind of relationship to facilitate my own development as a person and to be healthy, right? When that hasn't happened and now you're into adulthood, you're still looking for it in a way. And so there is this tendency to bring that into a relationship, and actually kind of almost just from an involuntary aspect, you're drawn to make that relationship try to fix that or resolve that for you. So something that I will say to clients that struggle with this is, you feel as if once you get the relationship to the right place, then you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But what is true is, as an adult, is once you become kind of more solidified and healed and are able to face the past and make sure you have proper boundaries, right, which we could talk about as well. When you have to become the kind of person that is stable enough to have a stable relationship. And so it's actually backwards. It's actually, you have to basically really take responsibility of yourself, regardless of what the other person's done, because nobody's perfect. That has to happen first. And the other person has to do it too.
Yes.
And then you can actually start to have an adult relationship, rather than sort of this child-parent dynamic or child-child dynamic or parent-parent dynamic, right? Which all of that is just a total mess that I think so many of us know, because we've been there.
Yeah. So you're saying that when Jesus in Matthew chapter 7 says to take the log out of your own eye so that you can see the speck in your neighbor's eye more clearly, that we can relate this in any sort of relational dynamic. And I think it's fair to say sometimes it's easiest to see these dynamics. I mean, when you're saying these things, I'm totally picturing them within a couple, and that's maybe our bent as therapists to see it that way. But this exists in all sorts of relationships and friendships, in small groups, in churches, right? Any gathering of people is a system.
Sure. And I want to speak to that because that's important.
Yeah.
I do some work with clients who've experienced hurt or brokenness in their experience of church, or maybe their parents were pastors as well, right? And so one of the things that I've found is this experience does affect their understanding, their relationship with God, right? And it's unique in how, but I think you're spot on. You could have secure relationships at home, but you've had some really upside down or broken or abusive experiences with a pastor or a ministry leader, or just faith in general, that the faith that you learned was actually so much about just, you have to become perfect and then you'll be loved, that you carry that in. How could you not? You carry that into your understanding of your faith in God, and so it could distort who you see God to be, or you could kind of learn to adapt in those environments in a way that actually suppresses something essential to your relationship with God, right? And I just want to give an example of that because I think that's hard to wrap our mind around, right? An essential ingredient, for example, would be something like faith, our sense of looking to something beyond ourselves to trust, to lean on, even when we don't have the whole picture, right? If somebody has experienced a parent or a pastor that uses that faith component to control you, or to benefit from you at your expense, or to just kind of drain you dry of your time and your energy and your passion, and then you experience betrayal, right? Now what happens is it doesn't feel safe to have faith. It doesn't feel safe to really lean on anybody, and that can affect your relationship with God. And so yeah, that does get difficult.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in my time as a pastor, I came to a real humility and care that when somebody starts acting funky, usually there's a story of how they've experienced something in the past. I think that's a good rule of thumb for just working with people, is that if somebody has a disproportionate response or reaction to something, or starts acting kind of, to approach that with curiosity and not an accusation, but to say, well, what's going on there? What's to borrow from Brene Brown, this is a quote we use a lot as therapists, is the story you're telling yourself. What's the story you're telling yourself? And I'm sure a lot of that story is true. Some of it might not be. Let's work on it together to discern what's happened in your past that influences and is maybe reverberating with today.
Yeah, it's like shifting from the question of what's wrong with this person to what happened to this person, right? What did they experience that they learned through that experience to do these things that are now really causing a lot of problems, right? Yeah. Don't want to invalidate that. Sometimes there is validity to disruptive people and disruptive behavior, but underneath that, right, it's what have they been through that's gotten them to this point?
Yeah. So let's do this. I do want to honor our time. I said we'd finish up at about 40 after for some questions and answers or questions and discussion, we could call it. If you, Mike, could suggest to people just to make this practical and pragmatic. One of the things I said since we had the idea to talk about this, attachment is so huge. We could say so many things about attachment, especially when you add in the theological perspective. Like, we could say so much. But in your work with people, either in the church or in the counseling office or in your life, what could I be doing this next week or a couple weeks, either in my own head or even in my own faith walk with God, or behaviorally different? What are the things I could do to be stewarding these ideas we're talking about more effectively?
Yeah. I think oftentimes the first step is just awareness, trying to notice yourself, trying to become aware. What are the things that I do without really thinking about it that push people away or create disruption in my relationships? And the reason we don't ask these questions is because the next thing we tend to do is just start to beat ourselves up or shame ourselves, or we have this inner voice, inner critic that's like, why? See, this is why no one would love me. This is why I keep my distance, right? This is why I can't trust people, right? So it's, if you can move from that awareness into curiosity first, so that awareness of, oh, this is what I'm noticing in myself, or maybe somebody's told you, maybe many people have told you, you tend to be this way, and you're like, I don't think you're right, but maybe come at it with curiosity, the curiosity that says, how can I make sense of this behavior based on what I've been through? Right? How can I make sense of this behavior based on what I've been through? So I tend to shut down when somebody disagrees with me in a Bible study, right, or whatever, or if I have an idea of what we should do, right, so from a pastoral perspective, if I have an idea of the direction we should go and people aren't getting on board, I start to feel angry. I start to feel like I just want to kind of take control, right, instead of just, no, don't do that, and then act like it didn't happen. Become aware and become curious, and start to investigate a little bit in your own story of, I wonder why I'm doing this. And you can use connection and safety along the way. So how is this maybe even creating safety for me? Is there some sort of threat here that I'm feeling drawn to act in this way to protect myself or protect something important to me?
Mm-hmm.
Or connection, right? Am I behaving in this way because I am trying to get some sort of relational need met that this other person or this other situation really isn't, it's not their responsibility to meet, right? So that would be a manipulation, for example, is right. Nobody wants to be told you're manipulating or you're manipulative, but so many of us are unconsciously manipulative. We're so terrified to be vulnerable and to just say, hey, I feel this, and I would like to ask you if you would be able to give me a hug, right? It's like, no, I'm gonna kind of do something really nice for you, and then get the reward hug that in reality the only reason I did that is because I just had a need, right?
Yeah, that's, I'm just thinking to myself, unintentional manipulation. We all bristle at that, but in reality, yeah, every Alfred Adler would say that all human behavior is purposive, which is just a fancy way of saying, like, we don't do something for nothing. And we like to think that we are high-minded, but in reality, you're right. I think there is a high-minded part of us, and there is also a part of us that works without a whole lot of our awareness, unless we're purposeful about that to just get stuff done, quickly and efficiently. And that's our job to steward all of this.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in relationship to your relationship to God, right? Maybe think about where there is a discrepancy between what you feel to be true about God or what God feels towards you. Maybe you might say, I don't feel that God loves me, or I just don't feel that he's there, or I feel like maybe there's a discrepancy between what you feel to be true with God and what you believe or know to be true of him from what you've been taught or what you've read in scripture. That to me is typically a sign that there's something you've lived through that's being brought in, right? And again, same thing, awareness of it, and then let's get curious. I wonder why I'm seeing God this way. Is there something I've come to believe about myself that I'm bringing into this relationship? Like, I just don't believe I'm inherently lovable. I have always gotten love through performance or service or accomplishment, right? And so you're bringing that in, right? So
that is so good. The self-examination of my beliefs. I once heard a pastor say that a good definition of belief is to act as if it's true. So if I believe God is generous, do I act as if that's true? If I believe that I'm his beloved child, do I act that way, or do I treat myself differently? I'll add one more, and I'll just, again, encourage our guests to maybe be thinking about, in this moment, thinking about a question you might have to throw into the conversation while you're hearing this. But I think another element that we could add to this is our prayer life, our direct interactivity with God. And I've had the blessing of doing a number of different cohorts and interesting things, related specifically to prayer practices. And if folks haven't, I really encourage that, because this is our direct avenue to the relationship of connection and safety. And so I'm thinking a lot of the practices you're talking about, Mike, line up so well with some of the more ancient practices of, like, the Ignatian Examen, to be holding what has happened throughout the day with God prayerfully, and to be inviting the Spirit to prompt us to notice things and to bring that to our awareness so that we can steward it more well. Or even I'm thinking of the prayer practice of lament. When a child who's well attached, when they experience a hardship, will bring that to their parent and say, hey, Mom, Dad, this hurts, or I don't know, or I'm angry, or I'm sad. And that's healthy attachment. And in the same way, God, our pain, our anger, our hurt is not too much for God. He wants us to share that with him too, and that is healthy for us. That is shaping for us. So I'm thinking some of these practices that come into my mind would be really great ways to activate growth in this area, for sure. So just in summary, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like your first suggestion was to be curious, have a posture of curiosity with any response that is either really intense or really reactive in nature, to be curious about those things in yourself. Number two was to notice whenever my intellectual understanding of God's character is incongruent with how I feel about myself or how I act about myself. And number three, which I suggested, would be to really cultivate our prayer practices and spend time directly with God intentionally and proactively. Say thank you for joining us. This is something that is really meaningful in all of our lives, and we're quite passionate about. And if anybody would have any interest in exploring some of these, I guess that would be a fantastic resource for people, is to start the counseling journey if they haven't before. I typically find that if you are asking yourself the question, hey, should I do counseling? If you're already asking yourself the question, then usually the answer is yes. Most of us are much better at giving help to others than asking for help ourselves, and especially us as professional helpers, we can definitely feel that. So happy to provide any direction or resources on that. If you go to our main website, whitestoneresources.com, there's a button at the top that says Get Started. If you fill out that form, it'll come right to me. I'd be happy to help you out with any of that. All right, so if there's nothing else, thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. Thank you so much.